There is a power in silence that most people will never truly grasp. It doesn't shout, it doesn't chase approval, and it doesn't fight to be seen, yet it is felt by everyone. We live in a world that celebrates noise, instant answers, loud confidence, and constant motion. However, true wisdom, especially the kind found in women, is often quiet, not out of fear, but from a place of focus, stability, and wholeness. A woman's true wisdom isn't always about having the highest degree or the loudest opinion in the room. It's the ability to step away from the chaos without needing to prove she's right. She is the one who does not confuse attention with respect. She is the one who understands that how she treats herself sets the tone for every other relationship in her life. So this conversation isn't about making an impression. It isn't about achieving perfection. It's about awareness. Because the moment a woman becomes aware of her habits, the way she moves, thinks, and reacts, she unleashes a quiet power that can transform the feeling of any room she enters. Let's walk toward that awareness together. If this is your first time here, welcome to our channel. This is a place where we share wisdom, practical advice, and life-changing insights. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a message that speaks to your soul, strengthens your spirit, and might just change the course of your life. Let's begin. There is a difference between being silent and being still on the inside. Many people are quiet on the outside, but their minds are like a bustling, overcrowded marketplace filled with shouts, bids for approval, fear of judgment, and a hunger for applause. But a truly wise woman learns what most people overlook. Inner silence isn't about removing external sounds. It's about quieting the inner conflict. She doesn't avoid people to stay calm. She simply doesn't let everything consume her attention. Her mind becomes a sacred space, off limits to just any noise from the outside, immune to every emotional storm. And this isn't born from arrogance. It's born from clarity, a clarity that comes from experiencing, time and again, what happens when you trade your inner peace for an attempt to solve outer chaos. She has learned, perhaps the hard way, that constantly arguing to prove her worth, endlessly explaining her boundaries, and forever reacting to others' emotions doesn't bring peace. It only brings exhaustion. In neuroscience, there's a concept called cognitive load. It's the amount of information your brain is processing at any given moment. Too much stimulation, whether from negative conversations, emotional drama, or constant overthinking, triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol. Over time, this overload weakens the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, self-control, and empathy. But when a woman learns to listen to the stillness within, she protects this sacred space. She gives her mind and body a chance to regulate. And this seemingly simple act becomes the foundation of an emotional intelligence that isn't just theoretical, but is lived out in her relationships. Imagine a woman who is always reactive. Her partner says something thoughtless, and she immediately snaps back. Her boss overlooks her work, and she seethes internally. A friend forgets to call, and she takes it as a personal rejection. Her life becomes a series of emotional roller coasters, draining, unbalanced, and unstable. Her nervous system never feels safe. But now picture another woman. Her partner raises his voice. She pauses, she breathes, and in that pause, she hears not just the words, but sees his pain. She does not meet chaos with chaos. She stays in her calm, and from that calm, she chooses a response that is wise, not reactive. This is the power of inner stillness. It is not weakness, it is mastery, and it changes how everyone relates to her. In Eastern teachings, there is a saying, "The wise one drinks the water but hears the ripple." It means she doesn't just live life, she listens to it deeply. She senses energy. She notices when a person's smile doesn't match their eyes. She picks up on the unspoken things in a conversation because her mind isn't cluttered with noise. She sees clearly. A woman like this becomes an enigma to others. Why? Because she is unpredictable. She doesn't enter every battle. She doesn't participate in every drama. She doesn't engage in every argument. And in a world addicted to reaction, her restraint is magnetic. People sense something different in her presence, a confidence, a quiet knowing. And yet this stillness isn't just spiritual, it's practical. In relationships, it's the difference between escalating a conflict and deepening a connection. There's a story of an old woman in a small town known for her gift of settling disputes between couples. They would come to her for advice, but she would often sit for a long time in silence, her eyes closed, just listening. When they asked why she took so long to speak, she would reply, "I wait for the truth to rise from the silence, not the anger, not the fear, but the truth itself." This is a woman who does not speak from her pain. She waits for her wisdom to return, and only then does she offer her words. Science backs this up. Studies show that giving the mind just 90 seconds of silence after an emotional trigger allows the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, to calm down, letting the logical brain come back online. This means that if you wait just a little while before you react, your chances of saying something wise, instead of something you'll regret, go up dramatically. Deeply intelligent women understand this, which is why they practice silence not just in meditation or morning rituals, but in the very heart of the storm. When they are insulted, they don't rush to defend. When they are misunderstood, they don't panic to explain. When they are ignored, they don't shrink. They stay still inside. And from that stillness, the next right move becomes clear. But this silence doesn't mean an absence of emotion. On the contrary, it means they feel everything, but are controlled by nothing. And this brings us to the second vital quality, knowing when to be soft and when to be still. Softness is often mistaken for weakness. Strength is sometimes confused with hardness. But a truly wise woman has outgrown these illusions. She has been too soft and been overlooked. She has been too hard and pushed love away. And now, through self-reflection and awareness, she carries both softness and strength in a perfect balance. Emotional discipline is the secret art she practices daily, not for others, but because she respects her own energy. She knows that reacting in anger might feel powerful in the moment, but it drains her. She understands that forgiving too quickly, agreeing too easily, and staying silent just to avoid a fight chips away at her dignity over time. So she masters a new rhythm. When a man disrespects her boundaries, she doesn't scream. She simply stops giving him access to her space. When a friend only calls when they need something, she doesn't lecture. She simply stops answering every time. When life feels overwhelming, she doesn't fall apart. She slows down, listens to her body, and adjusts her pace. This is steel, quiet, calm, strong, and unbending. But within that steel, there is still softness. The softness to forgive without being a fool. The softness to cry without losing her resilience. The softness to love deeply without losing herself. Psychologists call this emotional agility, the ability to move from one emotional state to another without getting stuck. It is not the absence of feelings, but the presence of choice. In relationships, this creates trust. Men, for example, feel more emotionally safe with a woman who can feel deeply without drowning in her emotions, a woman who can state her needs clearly without blaming or inducing guilt, a woman who maintains her grace even when things don't go her way. This is not a game. It is maturity, and it is what invites real intimacy. There's a story of a woman whose husband had grown cold and distant. For months, she tried everything. The talks, the tears, the silent treatment. Nothing worked. One evening, instead of repeating the old patterns, she said calmly, "I love you, but I'm done carrying this relationship all by myself. If you want to rebuild this with me, I'm here. But I will not beg for you to be present in your own life." It was the first time he truly heard her. Not because she was louder, but because she was clearer. Her words were not emotional threats. They were a boundary line drawn with grace, and he could feel the steel beneath her softness. A woman like this commands respect. Even if people disagree with her, they know she means what she says. Her presence doesn't bring chaos. Her love isn't desperate. Her emotions aren't a liability. She brings peace, and people either rise to meet it or they quietly drift away. From a neuroscience perspective, this kind of emotional regulation strengthens the prefrontal cortex, creating a cycle of greater resilience. When a woman manages her emotions well, she creates a stronger sense of safety in her relationships. And when a relationship is safe, her brain becomes more plastic and adaptable. It's a self-reinforcing cycle, but it all starts with one habit: to pause, to breathe before speaking, to ask herself, does this reaction align with the woman I am becoming? To choose her tone, her timing, and the truth of her words. And even when she stumbles, as all humans do, she doesn't shame herself. She reflects, she course corrects, she grows. This is emotional intelligence in action. A woman who knows when to be soft and when to be firm is not easily manipulated. She cannot be guilt-tripped into overgiving, and she cannot be provoked into saying things she will regret. She moves with purpose, and it gives her relationships an invisible but undeniable strength. She relies on neither dominance nor submission. She lives in balance, and that balance of silence and insight, of softness and strength, becomes the foundation of her leadership, her love, and her legacy. There is an invisible skill that truly intelligent women possess, but it often goes unnoticed in a world that values being loud and speaking up. It is the art of observation. She has learned to notice, to listen beyond the surface, and to remain present when the world is pushing her to react. This habit isn't born from fear, but from discipline. It is a quiet form of power, a choice to understand before seeking to be understood. A deeply intelligent woman observes more than she speaks, not because she has nothing to say, but because she understands. Most people listen to reply, not to comprehend, and she has no desire to waste her energy on surface-level conversations and shallow connections. There's a story of a woman who joined a new team at work. While others rushed to introduce themselves, prove their value, and mark their territory, she spent a few weeks just watching. She listened. She noticed how people spoke when the boss was around, and how they spoke when he wasn't. She saw who took the credit, who took the responsibility, and who stayed silent during conflict. By the end of the month, she had a map not just of the roles and titles, but of the character, the energy, the motives, and the integrity of the people around her. This habit of quiet observation allowed her to navigate with wisdom, not anxiety. When she finally did speak, her words carried weight, not because she was the loudest, but because her understanding was built on a foundation of presence. And presence is rare. When a woman truly sees people, not through a lens of judgment, but with clarity, she earns a kind of respect that cannot be demanded. Neuroscience confirms this. The act of deep observation activates the mirror neuron system, a network in the brain that allows us to feel empathy and intuitively understand the emotional states of others. When a woman trains herself to notice not just words, but tone, posture, and energy, she is sharpening her intuition. This intuition, or what some call a woman's sixth sense, isn't mystical. It is the result of paying attention, combined with emotional literacy. So many women have said that, looking back, they knew. They saw the red flags but ignored them. The man who wouldn't meet their eyes when he apologized. The friend whose compliments always had a sting of competition. The colleague who was charming in public but dismissive in private. The signs were all there, but they were buried under the noise of daily life and the desire to see only the good. But a truly intelligent woman doesn't rush to conclusions or jump to defend her point of view. She pauses. She reflects. She watches how people behave when they are angry, when they are happy, when they feel powerful, and when they are afraid. She listens with all her senses because she understands that people reveal themselves not just in what they say, but in how they say it, and in the things they leave unsaid. In relationships, this habit is both a shield and a gateway to intimacy. A woman who observes is not easily fooled by charm. She sees behind the facade. She notices the gap between words and actions. She watches how a man treats the waiter, how he speaks about his exes, how he handles rejection, and how he responds to criticism, and from these small things, she understands his character. But she also uses her observation to nurture love. She notices when her partner is quiet, not because he is distant, but because he is carrying a burden. She senses when something is off, not because he says so, but because his energy has shifted. And this allows her to show up in a way that creates safety, because she isn't guessing, she is paying attention. One wise woman said, "I don't ask many questions, I just watch the answers reveal themselves." This quiet awareness makes her presence magnetic. She listens in a way that makes people feel seen. She notices the small things, The shift in someone's voice when they talk about their dream, the drop in their shoulders when they finally feel safe, the light in their eyes when they recall a childhood memory. And because she sees people, they open up to her. But her observation is not passive. She uses it to guide her own behavior. She watches her own tone when she's tired. She observes her own thought patterns when she feels insecure. She becomes a student of her own inner world. And this is where observation becomes transformation. When she can watch herself without harsh judgment, she can change with grace. She notices when she's falling back into old patterns of people-pleasing, over-explaining, or emotionally shutting down. And because she sees it clearly, she is not a slave to her habits. This self-awareness gives her emotional freedom. It's the difference between saying, "This is just who I am, I've always been this way," and understanding, "This is what I've noticed, and this is how I can change." From this grounded state of observation, another powerful habit is born: creation. A deeply intelligent woman isn't content to simply consume information, trends, opinions, or approval. She creates. She creates space for her mind. She creates time for her well-being. She creates beauty around her, harmony in her relationships, and structure in her days. This creativity is not always public. It may not show up on a stage or in a portfolio, but it is real. She journals. She prepares meals with intention. She mindfully shapes her mornings. She is a deliberate creator of her own environment. And in doing so, she reminds herself daily, "I am the author of my life, not a passive character waiting for something to happen." There is a difference between being in motion and being in motion without purpose. The woman who is constantly scrolling, reacting, rushing, and checking notifications is in motion without meaning. But the woman who pauses to create, who reads to grow, who writes to understand, who builds to express, that woman is in motion with intention. She is alive. This shift from passive consumption to active creation changes everything in her relationships. When a woman is constantly consuming advice, approval, and opinions, she loses touch with her own wisdom. She becomes dependent on what others think is right, what she should feel, and who she should be. But when she creates, she reclaims that power. Her journal becomes her counselor. Her routines become her sanctuary. Her silence becomes her teacher. In a romantic relationship, this habit prevents emotional dependency. She does not look to her partner to be her source of meaning or emotional stability. She brings a full, self-sustaining life to the relationship. She creates joy rather than waiting for it. She offers care rather than demanding it. And this makes her love generous, not desperate. There's a story of a woman who went through a painful breakup. Her identity had been built around the relationship. When it ended, she felt lost. For months, she consumed everything: self-help books, online courses, therapy sessions. They all helped, but something was missing. Then one day, she picked up an old paintbrush. She hadn't painted in years. As she began to create again, something shifted. The grief didn't vanish, but it was transformed. Her art gave her a voice, a mirror, and a place to return to herself. She later said, "It wasn't the painting that healed me, but the reminder that I still had something to offer the world besides my pain." This is the wisdom of creation. Creativity is not about making masterpieces. It is the practice of being present. And in that presence, a woman remembers who she is. Science confirms this truth. Engaging in creative activities activates the brain's default mode network, which is linked to self-reflection, emotional processing, and even problem-solving. When a woman creates, she is not escaping reality. She is integrating it. This habit also changes her relationship with time. She no longer feels like life is happening to her. She becomes a participant, not just a reactor. She chooses how to start her day, how to end it, how to rest, and how to reconnect with herself. She doesn't just consume food, she creates nourishment. She doesn't just consume media, she creates boundaries around it. She doesn't consume relationships, she contributes to them, she breathes life into them. And when she does this, something beautiful happens. Her energy becomes magnetic. People can feel when a woman is living with intention. There is a depth to her presence. She isn't chasing attention, she isn't competing, she just is. And that is more powerful than any performance. But this creativity also requires discipline. It is easier to scroll than to write. It is easier to react than to build. It is easier to binge watch than to reflect. And so, a deeply intelligent woman doesn't wait for inspiration. She creates a rhythm, a space in her life where creativity becomes a habit. Whether it's 10 minutes in the morning, a quiet walk in the evening, or one day a week unplugged from the world, she honors it. And in doing so, she finds herself again and again, not in the noise, but in the quiet act of choosing what she brings into the world. Observation teaches her what is. Creativity reminds her of what can be. And together they form the core of a life lived with purpose, not for show. There is a quiet elegance to a woman who doesn't need to explain her boundaries. She doesn't announce them with aggression. She doesn't beg for them to be respected. She doesn't break herself to avoid inconveniencing others. Her boundaries aren't brick walls. They are a natural rhythm. And those who can dance to that rhythm stay. Those who can't quietly fade out of her life. A deeply intelligent woman understands that boundaries are not about keeping people out. They are about keeping her energy aligned. Life has taught her that giving too much to those who give little back leads to resentment, burnout, and a disconnection from her own center. So her boundaries become sacred, not enforced with anger, but established with consistency. If someone repeatedly shows they don't value her time, she doesn't yell, she simply becomes less available. If someone subtly crosses her line with disrespect or manipulation, she doesn't plead for them to see her worth. She steps back with grace, with peace, with finality. And in that withdrawal, she sends a powerful message, not with her words, but with her actions. I choose me. The world often misunderstands women who operate this way. They are called cold, distant, or too proud. But what is missed is the wisdom in their silence. They have cried behind closed doors. They have bent themselves out of shape too many times. They have screamed their grief into a void. And in that fire, they were forged not into indifference, but into clarity. Clarity doesn't need to shout. In the language of psychology, the term enmeshment describes the loss of personal boundaries in a relationship, where one person's identity becomes so entangled with another's that their sense of self is blurred. Deeply discerning women have often lived through this. Their love was so all-consuming that they lost themselves. And when that love was not met with respect, they were left empty. But instead of becoming bitter, they became deeper, not louder. And from that inner light, they began to build a life where their boundaries were not a reaction, but an act of self-honor. Think of the woman who always said yes. Yes to helping, yes to staying late, yes to forgiving without any real healing. She believed love meant self-sacrifice and that being available was her value. But inside, she was quietly breaking down. No one saw it because she never showed it, until one day she had nothing left to give. She hit a wall of exhaustion, not just physical, but soul deep. And it was in that quiet place of depletion that she realized something sacred. No one was going to give her the life she deserved unless she claimed it for herself. And claiming it meant setting boundaries. She started small. She turned off her phone after 9 p.m. She didn't offer a long explanation. She just did it. She said no to social events that didn't align with her spirit. She canceled plans when her body needed rest. She stopped responding to disrespect, even when it was wrapped in a compliment. And slowly the world around her began to adjust. Some people drifted away, others drew closer, but now they treated her with the respect she was finally showing herself. A woman who doesn't explain her boundaries isn't being cruel. She is simply no longer available for behavior that dishonors her. She knows that the right man for her will not require her to shrink, to overgive, or to endlessly justify herself to be understood. He will read her silence. He will honor her rhythm. He will value her peace. In relationship dynamics, this becomes a filter. People who are accustomed to testing others with guilt trips, emotional manipulation, or subtle pressure will quickly find themselves on the outside. She doesn't engage in the power struggle. She lets go, even when it hurts, because for her, no connection is worth the price of losing herself. There's a saying, your space is non-negotiable. If someone doesn't like it, they are free to leave. A deeply discerning woman embodies this truth, not as a defense mechanism, but as a philosophy of life. She has nothing to prove. Her presence is her answer. Her absence is her answer. Her peace is her answer. But boundaries are not just about others. They are also about herself. She sets boundaries with her own tendencies to overthink, to self-criticize, and to revisit wounds that are just beginning to heal. She notices when her mind is drifting into old stories where she was not enough, unloved, or rejected. And she gently tells herself, "Not today. I don't live there anymore." This self-boundary becomes an act of inner leadership. She is no longer a slave to every thought and emotion. She respects her own energy too much to waste it on regret or revenge. Her attention becomes a sacred currency, and she only spends it on what aligns with her truth. One woman shared how she used to let people explain away their bad behavior. "He didn't mean it. He's just stressed. They're doing the best they can." But she learned over time that constantly making space for other people's inconsistency was erasing her own integrity. She wasn't just letting them treat her poorly. She was teaching them that it was okay. So she changed. Now, when someone apologizes but doesn't change, she leaves. When someone promises but doesn't follow through, she adjusts her expectations, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because she has learned that love without respect is not love, and attention without consistency is not commitment. In a romantic relationship, a woman like this is both mysterious and solid. Mysterious because she cannot be easily figured out or controlled. Solid because her energy is clear. Her partner feels the safety of her standards. He knows that her love is deep, but it is not without responsibility. She will not chase. She will not convince. She will not sacrifice her essence to keep someone interested. This isn't power through dominance. It is power through self-possession. She knows who she is. She knows what she values. And she knows that anyone who tries to cross her boundaries in the name of love is not really offering love at all. An Eastern philosophy says that a woman in harmony with herself is like water, soft enough to flow, but strong enough to shape mountains. She doesn't fight life. She moves with it. And part of that flow is knowing when to say no, when to pull back, and when to protect the space that allows her to flourish. That protection isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's turning off the news. Sometimes it's refusing to participate in family drama. Sometimes it's withholding an emotional reaction when someone is clearly trying to provoke one. And sometimes it's simply choosing silence over arguing with someone who is committed to misunderstanding her. In great calm, there is no need to explain, trusting that what is aligned will stay and what is not will fall away. Boundaries are not built in a day. They are formed through years of experience, moments of heartbreak, and the quiet decision to never again betray oneself. The woman who has lived through betrayal, disappointment, and confusion eventually arrives at this sacred place. "I know what it feels like to be treated poorly. I will not let it happen again, not from others and not from myself." And then her life becomes simpler, not because it lacks conflict, but because it has less confusion. Her yes is full of presence. Her no is full of peace, and she no longer feels the need to justify either one. The woman who walks this path transforms the atmosphere around her. People become more mindful in her presence, more respectful, not out of fear, but out of admiration. They sense that this is not someone to be taken for granted, not someone to be thrown crumbs, not someone to be guilt-tripped, manipulated, or slowly worn down. This woman has come home to herself, and in doing so, she teaches others how to treat her, not with words, but with her very being. If someone asks her why she won't allow something, she won't give a speech. She will just smile and walk away, because her boundary is not an explanation. It is a reflection of her own worth, and it requires no one's permission. There is a profound strength in a woman who treats herself with dignity, and it shows up not just in her speech or her posture, but in her daily rituals. Not in the grand gestures the world applauds, but in the quiet, repeated actions she takes when no one is watching. These small rituals, often dismissed as insignificant, are the very architecture of her self-respect. They are the evidence of how she values herself, not in theory, but in practice. A deeply discerning woman understands that confidence isn't an accident, it's a result. It is the result of how she talks to herself, how she eats, rests, moves, dresses, listens, walks, and comes back to her center. These things may seem ordinary, but they shape who she is. They create the soil from which her relationships, her decisions, and her inner peace grow. It all begins when she wakes up. A woman in harmony with herself does not reach for her phone first thing in the morning. She reaches for silence, for intention, for presence. She understands that the first thoughts she allows in set the tone for her day. So she creates a morning rhythm that reminds her of who she is before the world tries to tell her who to be. It might be a few deep breaths, a warm drink, a line in a journal, or a few quiet moments at a window. Not because she has to, but because she respects herself enough to begin her day with awareness. There's a story of a woman who was constantly exhausted, not just from her job, but from the emotional demands of everyone around her, her children, her colleagues. There was a time she tried to earn love. There was a time she was afraid to say no. There was a time she waited for someone else to come and give her strength. Now she knows the truth. The strength was always inside her, in her power to choose, in her ability to stay calm, in her resolve to honor herself. This isn't a philosophy for a book club. This is real life. Today she has a choice, and so do you. Start now. Set the boundary. Take the quiet moment for yourself. Take a deep breath and remember, you are the author of your story, and if you ever doubt it, just return to the silence. It will always remind you of who you are.